All right. Can you hear me okay? I guess we're live, so
I think I can if you can hear me.
I can hear on YouTube. I can't hear you, Ed. Well, Dustin will be joining us shortly. We are here to talk about demographic catastrophe, the cliff, the population decline. Malthus was right, or the opposite of right, and everything's going to hell, and we should all drink now, for tomorrow we die. Kidding. That is a very that is the black pill view. We were actually just chatting about this in the leadership chat about how there's a tendency in social media and content generation to that rewards negativity. If you're criticizing, if you're attacking, or if you're predicting disaster, it draws people's eyes like vultures to a dead animal. Because if everything is fine, what's to see? So it feels like the nature of social media promotes catastrophizing, and it's easy to get overwhelmed and to get blackpilled by the sheer volume of catastrophizing that people are crawling over the corpses of each other to get to and to push their own version of. And so I do think it's valuable to not just hear that everything's okay, but to really dwell upon it, and every once in a while to really go into the details of the claims of why these things are purported to be catastrophic and apocalyptic. So that's sort of our discussion for tonight. So Ed, with that intro, how are you doing today? You are still muted.
I am not.
You are not muted, but I still can't hear you. We'll work through this technical stuff. We'll keep an ear out for Ed, but I will do my best to work through the basic argument that a lot of people make about why this demographic decline. First of all, the claim is that everyone is having fewer babies. Everyone is having fewer children. People are getting married later. They're reproducing less. There's also a fertility issue. People, even if people wanted to, maybe they're not able to have as many kids. And there may be a degree of truth to that. But it is believed that, because we've been at lower populations before in the past globally, and it wasn't the end of the world then. But there is an argument from economists mostly that say if we're not continuing to run faster, then the gears will grind to a halt and everything will collapse around us. We need to keep running faster. We need to keep growing, because the experience of shrinking is going to be devastating. It's not like going back to population levels of the past that were fine. The movement in the negative direction population wise is supposedly much worse than just being there. So Ed, can I hear you now?
Can you hear me now?
No.
No.
Okay. Well, I will try to run this show. Sean Holt can hear Ed.
Hey, Sean.
Why can I not hear? All right, I'm going to try leaving and rejoining.
Hey, Tormentos. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Fantastic. Sorry about that. Still getting everything set up in the studio over here. I am off my game today.
There's some serious technical difficulties my Mac is fighting with my mic, which was trying to play with my phone. I got peroxide in my eye by accident 15 minutes ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's extra not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind that's supposed to go in your ears. So maybe I won't be able to see you in a few minutes.
They do specify on the instructions there, I think, that it's
Don't
for ear
ask.
use only. But not today. Today's just a day for technical difficulty today, guys. CB backstage as we were getting ready to go, his devices were giving him a hard time, so I suspect his headphones were just not having it. But I will be set up and ready to go here soon. All right. Should be good to go.
Waiting for you.
There we go.
I can hear you guys now. I have no idea how much I talked over you guys before.
All right, here we go. All right, we are back in business, boys. All
We're
right,
back.
technical difficulties resolved. Only 7 minutes in, should be good to go for the next hour. So, how's everyone doing? And I heard CB referenced good old Malthus at the outset, and you know he's one of our favorites over here at the life affirming Order of Fire. So conversation getting off to a good start. But how is everyone?
Well, I can hear you guys now, so already better. No, doing good. We're getting kind of smoked out over here in the Pacific Northwest area, so we'll be excited for the wind to take this this Canadian smoke away soon.
Yeah, those damn Canadians always trying to smoke us out. I think it's their revenge for the tariffs.
Maybe. Oh, that would be very clever. Yeah.
They're coming after us. Yeah.
They should have aimed more east for like DC area.
You know, that would have been the
More
DC
thoughtful.
area specifically. Yeah,
Hey
that
now.
you know, just smoke out the East Coast. I'm safe down here in Florida, so would have been no problem for me.
We got it down here in the DC area last year from the gifts from Canada.
The gifts that keep on giving.
Burnt offerings.
Yeah. In all seriousness, though, I know those fires get pretty intense up there, especially in the flatlands up there. They call it Shield. It's just such dense woodland. It just burns like crazy once it lights up. So hopefully all the Canadians out there are doing okay, staying safe, and not getting $25,000 fines for going hiking. But ideally, but in a way that does tie into the conversation that we wanted to have today with the imminent population collapse that is in the rage for conversation right now. Everyone from Tim Pool to even Sargon of Akkad just recently dropped a video on it, which kind of inspired me to want to talk about it. Because Carl has a different take on it that much more closely mirrors what I think ours will be, or at the very least that mine is, where indeed population is collapsing. There's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, feminism being the primary factor there. I think that most people at this point, whether they call it feminism by name or just understand the beliefs of it, are a massive detriment to society. But the damage is already done. The birth rates are plummeting. We're at less than half now that the boomers were. So we're expecting generations to get just progressively, exponentially smaller as time goes on. And it's easy to understand why people would think that would lead to a collapse, because since the boomer generation, we've understood population growth to be entirely necessary for growth of a country, for growth of an economy. But CB, you mentioned earlier historical precedent. And if you look back at the past, looking at things like the Black Death. I mean, a third of the population of Europe was wiped out, and it actually led to prosperity, right? So it's not
in the
quite.
long run. I mean, it sucked to have your village, decimated.
Oh, absolutely. So I mean, like decades down the line,
Yeah.
as generations rebuilt, the actual decimation was obviously awful and unspeakable, and a kind of difficulty that no one today can really comprehend because we have it so easy.
Yeah,
But,
and I mean, part of the problem is, we have created systems thinking we were like so smart. We created these pyramid schemes of like social security and pension system stuff that require, um, constant population growth in order to subsidize these systems that were not sustainable. So if you have a system that's not sustainable, you need to constantly be bringing in outside sources. Um, well, that's not the population decline's fault. That's your fault for creating this policy that requires this thing. So where there is sufficient willpower to fix or undo that social security system, which I mean I've already paid into, and I think most millennials have came to terms many years ago with the fact that we're never going to see a dollar of this. It's not
yeah,
we're not going to get our share of this thing. It was just a bad idea. We got the can got kicked down the road. It's landed on us. Let's deal with it so that our kids won't have to deal with it, and move on. And I think there is a fair bit of will for millennials to we've already accepted that we're getting the sort of short end of this stick, but that's it's okay. I mean, it's not great, it's not fun, it's not fair, but what are you going to do? Keep passing it down,
right,
snowballing for Gen Z? No,
right.
um,
I think a huge chunk of us have accepted that it's just time to buckle down or lock
yeah,
in, as Gen Z says, and just get the hell to work, right?
right.
Really
There's a great
down to.
rule that Scott Adams has been trying to push for years now called the Adams Law of Slow Moving Disasters, which is that with sufficient time, if we can see a problem coming a fair distance down the road, we're usually really good at resolving it. There were like back in the Y2K days. Now I'm no coder or engineer, but apparently there was some reason to believe that Y2K could have been a really big problem for computers. But because some guys saw that coming years in advance and it became kind of famous, they were able to just change some rules in how computer time clocks and stuff worked, and it was just absolutely nothing. Nothing
Right.
happened at all. And I think theoretically, there are things we can do to deal with things like our debt, things like our population decline, that will at least mitigate. It won't necessarily be painless, and it won't necessarily be easy, but many of the solutions are kind of simple,
Yeah, and
even if they're hard.
we're not entitled to an easy life anyway.
Right.
The historical precedent for it, again, going back to Malthus himself, had things stayed static and the trend stayed static and progressed exactly as they were at the time Malthus was writing, we would have been in trouble. The world would have been headed for collapse, but that's not the case. We as a species and as individual countries innovated, primarily in the West, but innovated, and were able to sustain greater population numbers. And eventually, as we're seeing now, the population growth tapered off. So, I mean, I remember even as a kid when they were still whining about, oh, there's too many people on the earth. There are a few smarter people out there. Jordan Peterson among them before his craziness and subsequent decline. He mentioned that the cap is more likely to be around 10 billion, and we probably won't pass that number. Well, turns out we never even reached that number. The world as a whole, excepting very, very few countries, I want to say there's like a dozen that have positive replacement rates. and the majority of those are in Africa and I think India, and that's it.
Yeah, and a lot of that is like weirdly subsidized in strange ways. There's also
conversations there.
Yeah, there's also a lot of the declining birth rate that has been planned and intended. Like if you listen to, for example, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation talk about this, they have been talking for years about spreading higher education, specifically because they say more educated populations have fewer kids.
Yep.
So they are spreading higher education in order to reduce birth rates.
That's interesting because of the fact that, let's say you want to, you see the words the demographic cliff, and you decide to look it up and read information about that. It's also called the enrollment cliff.
Yep.
So there's data that shows that that 2008-2009 recession period is when the sort of the most urgent cliff that's apparently happening now. People stopped having babies then. You would think, because they could not afford it. That would be millennials, for sure. But it's all framed that there's not going to be enough college graduates by the year 2046. And that the peak of high school graduation will be 2025, 2026, and then there'll be some sort of 15% decline over the next 10 years.
Yep, and that'll result in a lot of institutions closing, which they're panicking about because they've been running a racket for so long, based on government subsidies and handouts that are based on student size. Just trying to get
ironic if they don't understand their own role in the demographic decline.
What does that say? What does that say about non-university? Like, what does that say about trades, for instance?
Well, based on our experience, the trades are very prosperous when it comes to replacement rates. So
it's been good for me.
But if the idea is that there's not enough 18-year-olds.
Well,
right.
I think this segues into a really interesting kind of tangent. Allow me to make a bit of a digression for a moment. One of the most fascinating stories in association with this whole subject has been the incredible failure of the incentive programs that have been pushed in some countries that try to will give women tax refunds for life for every kid they have up to 4, and after 4 you pay 0 taxes the rest of your life, basically. And we're going to give all these financial incentives, and this has happened in various parts of Eastern Europe and a few other places. And what's so extraordinary is the like they've pushed up birth rates by like less than 1%.
Yep.
Like absolutely nothing. Which I think gets to a question about what actually causes increases in birth rates or declines in birth rates. And there's, of course, a number of factors. I don't think the people who talk about biology and chemistry and fertility rates and so forth are wrong. But one of the big factors, I think, is hope. And one of the things that is a weirdly common experience among university educated students. So much of university education, especially in the social studies and liberal arts, is educating people in the problems of the world. All the problems. There's global warming that's going to drown us all and burn us up and also freeze us and whatever else, with ever-changing models of what's supposed to be happening in the next 3 years. 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Literally, I have talked with probably a dozen people who have said that they don't want to, they are too worried about the future to bring kids into the world. And that is and the number is probably much higher at a subconscious level. So when you remove people from that collegiate culture of fear mongering and catastrophizing, you are left with I think a higher default of hope. Now the news is trying to come in and fill in the gap for us a little bit, and social media to a degree as well. But I think the loss of the increasing discrediting of academia and the fairly thorough discrediting of the media is creating a more inoculated, not so much millennials, but Gen Z. And I mean, it's easy to forget that populations move in cycles too. It's just that historically, a lull would be the result of a war or a really, really bad plague, like Spanish flu, which was not quite Black Plague, but it killed a lot of people. We had, boomers was the baby boom that came after World War II. World War II killed a lot of people. A lot of people. Now, we haven't had a massive war. Iraq and Afghanistan, we lost several thousand people, maybe more than that, maybe like a few 10,000 people. But it's nothing on the scale of what we've faced in the past. So maybe we're just on a sort of alternative mode of, I hate to put it in crass language, but like a bulk cut cycle as far as population numbers go. But it feels like there was a dramatic shift in hope in a positive direction in the last 7 to 8 years.
Definitely.
And I think we've seen birth rates begin to go back up again. I mean, we're not like caught up by any stretch of the imagination. But the problems are not historically unprecedented. We've just created some additional problems in the financial and federal sector.
Right. I think the problems in terms of the civilizational cycle you're talking about with population boom and bust, that's normal and has been consistent throughout history. I think the context where it's happening now is different. And I think that hope is obviously a massive factor in university education in there. But what I've found, just this is somewhat anecdotal, but also supported by data, is women. This is a very interesting stat I only recently learned. When women decide to have kids, the average number of kids they have has been consistent since before the 50s. Right? It's like the average is 2 or 3, I think, or 3 or 4. It's a much higher number than you'd expect. The problem is that there's so many women that aren't having kids. The birth rate stat
is that averaging in the women who don't have kids, or is it?
That's what I'm saying. Is the women who do have kids have on average 2 to 4 on average, whereas the problem is the reason the birth rate per woman, which is how it's measured, is so low is because so many women are choosing not to. Now, what I'm seeing, and this ties into universities collapsing and why I think it's going to be self-correcting in a way, is when you get these highly educated women, and of course I have nothing against women necessarily improving themselves or if they have those sort of goals. I'm not attracted.
There's a question as to whether going to higher education is improving yourself, but
exactly,
that's for men too. So
it's a cultural question. I'm not a trad cat that's going to say that we should make women getting educated illegal, but there's definitely a very strong cultural factor where when women go to university and then go into a corporate job, right, where they have their corporate overlords and they're just corporate drones. Some of them love it, but they're surrounded by other women who are childless. So you get an entire community of women who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, childless. So the only people these women have to look up to when they're 22, graduating and going to work, are women who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, childless. That's all they know. Whereas when you see women who have entire friend groups that all have kids, suddenly they decide that they want to have kids, and then they join that cohort of having 2 to 4 kids.
Yeah. And this is much broader than just what you're describing. Is, I mean, it's the corporate culture, but something my wife has complained about too is that there was a time in the past where it was sort of expected that there would be kids just around in most places. There are far more not kid-friendly places now. and places that are not designed to accommodate kids than there were in the past. One of the things that our good friend Carl Benjamin pointed out several months ago is that if you look at the architecture of average McDonald's that you go to today, they are no longer designed for children. They are these kind of quick restaurants for adults, which is kind of incredible to think about. That just the fact of how far McDonald's has moved in that direction.
They don't build play places anymore, like the playgrounds gone.
Right.
And this is something he brought up. It's the Jack Posovic's Pizza Hut nationalism, right? It's the idea that even though these chain restaurants are slop, the point is that it's a family-friendly environment that the middle class or lower class can take their families to. But now everything is so sterile and corporate and bland. And this kind of goes back to the internal debate we had on Cracker Barrel and why I think there's such a huge cultural backlash against them, turning it into this bland corporate nightmare. There's just the brutalist blandness. I think what they were going for is called, what is it? Country chic or farmhouse chic, where it's like the bland white walls with artistically curated cast iron pans decorating them, and just booths and boring. You're turning it into a freaking Denny's, right?
Right.
And it's completely sterilizing it. And even then, Denny's is nowhere near as family friendly as it used to be. I mean, you're on road trips as a kid, it's either going to be Cracker Barrel, Denny's, IHOP, somewhere quick and easy you're going to stop. It's kid friendly. They have kids menus. They had little paper menus kids could draw on.
Is Waffle House considered kid friendly?
Depends on the time of day
that
and
was
where
a joke, by the
House
way.
If Waffle House is on MLK Boulevard, probably not the place to take your kids at 2 a.m.
Right.
But otherwise,
Okay.
very kid friendly. I have great memories there. But it's I think you're right. It's a universal sterilization, but literally and metaphorically in terms of sterilizing people.
Maybe this is a lot of what it comes down to is exposure. So much of what we're exposed to in media, in our work, in just everywhere, there are not kids there.
Yes.
So we're not thinking about them as much. I had
historically.
What's that?
It's weird to think about historically that there's just so few kids. Like you think about every great novel written, every even movies pre 1980. There's always very, very prominently featured kids just there. They might not be active.
So some of them are participating. Look at Mark Twain's novels, or Charles Dickens, some of the best-selling novels of his day.
Right. Or even like Clint Eastwood westerns. The Village People includes a significant number of children. They're not participating in the story per se, but they're there. You look at movies now. I don't think there's any kids in the John Wick movies. Like zero.
Yeah.
At all. Not even just walking around on the street.
Yeah. I had this very interesting back and forth with this really cool guy online named Andrew Briggs, who posed as a challenge. He said, "Name me one good reason why you should be allowed to post your kids on your public social media channels." And he was citing all kinds of safety issues and stalkers and pedophiles and bad people doing terrible things. And I'm like, that's all valid. That's all good and real. But what we share on social media is what we love, right? I messaged him in response. I'm like, here's a possible answer, and all your reasons are valid. But against that, I said basically, how are we going to, I curate my social media feed with weight training stuff, gun stuff, and interesting books and stuff that I want to see more of and want to do more of in the world. If you want there to be more kids in the world, you have to expose people to more kids and the possibilities of happy families, because social media is just so full of people sharing their bad family stories.
Yes.
And those are, in reality, they're it's not a exact analog, but they're kind of more like man bites dog stories than they are like dog bites man stories. Good families are not nearly as uncommon as the people who had some bad experiences or see bad experiences shared online come to believe.
Very
And
true.
so sharing the goodness of your own family experiences and your positive experiences with your family can be motivating and inspiring to others. And he was like surprised by this. He was sufficiently floored that he actually made a full reel sharing that idea. And my guy was like, "This is a great answer," and which encouraged me. Oh, I should post my family more often.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
If
my
it's
son
a safety thing,
whittling or whatever.
blur their faces, you can cover them and stuff. Like those safety
Yeah,
concerns are totally valid with
they are.
the sort of access that these platforms give predators. It's pretty undeniable. So it's a valid concern to have, but culturally speaking, you're 100% on the money
Yeah,
that it's being surrounded by kids. I think part of the reason that my whole life I've been open to the idea of kids is growing up with cousins and family that's always either older or younger. There were always babies being born my entire life. So I grew up around kids, and
yeah,
I thought it was completely normal. But I'm meeting a lot of people who don't have that. And what I'm seeing in terms of the cultural shift, though, which you kind of touched on, is with social media, the trad wife influencers and the trad influencers in general. Obviously, it's a fad and it's kind of weird, and some of it's a little bit fetishized. But the idea there that women are admiring this archetype they've come to find of a trad wife who gets to stay home and bake sourdough all day. They find that as desirable. That's a huge shift, and it's gotten to the point now where there are magazines that are like a married woman's Cosmo. Basically, there's one specifically that's called Elle, I think, Elle magazine,
Hmm.
and it's like ELLE, and it's a women's magazine that they build themselves like a conservative alternative, but it's the same stuff. They still have the sex articles. It's just that it's sex with your husband instead of sex with a stranger, right? But the point is that it's
It's cool.
catering. It's got sourdough recipes in there. It's got these very feminine dresses in there, as opposed to stereotypical just butt crack joggers
Yeah.
or whatever. So
Not to sound like too much of a sexist here, but it does seem that women are more susceptible to, well, they're more like social energy parakeets in the minds, right? They're more sensitive to the energy that's in the air in society. And so if there's a lot of anxiety,
yes,
they pick it up and feel it more intensely than men do, I think. And not to shift too intensely in tone from the people we're citing here, but there was a VAP podcast some years ago about this, and he said the problem with Christian purity culture is that it just stacks one more layer of anxiety on top of all the other existing anxiety out there. And it's anxiety about student loan debt, about social expectations, about the environment, about how I'm ever going to buy a house, about all these things that depresses that natural desire to have children. And so his prescription was a YOLO culture. I
don't disagree. Like, think about some of the guys we know that have, I mean, very happy families, and it's literally just a YOLO, right? Like, oh, she's pregnant again. Cool. It's a totally happy family situation.
And that actually segues very nicely into Ian's question of how do you combat bad faith actors who are up to no good? How would you protect your kids online while at the same time promoting kids? There are certain very basic best practices you can do to reduce your risks. You can't get rid of your risks entirely. You can look both ways before you cross the street. There is always still a chance you'll get hit by a car. But if you do that, you can usually cross the street fairly safely. There are things you can do. There are things you can teach your kids to reduce their risks. And you can also look at the odds and the actual statistics on this. And the odds of your children being abused or harassed or whatever in that way are incredibly low. And again, this is one of the problems of social media, is that these man bite dog stories become so large in our minds because they get presented to us over and over again. It's easy to forget. Just like Dustin, I don't know exactly what year you were born, but I was born in 1990. The things we were doing as kids running around, and I know it's a different world today. I know there are risks of people and stuff that there weren't back then, but like I would climb like 80 feet up a tree when I was 5.
Yep.
You know, and Ed probably had even wilder stories. You know, like the risks that were tolerable back then. Like my family and I just went camping last weekend, just a local sort of BLM open land, and our kids were like climbing around some rocks and stuff, and there was a risk of someone falling like a good distance, you know, 5 or 6 feet from one of these rock faces. And my kids are 7, 5, 3, and 2, so you know it happens sometimes. And you know, there's a part of you as a parent that wants to intervene and be like, "Oh no, don't risk that. I want you to fall and hurt your head or something." And you have to just sit back and be like, "No, they're okay." And bring that YOLO attitude that Bap was describing to your parenting as well. Kids are far more resilient, and it's a huge difference in energy between parents with their first child and parents with their third or fourth. By the time you get around to third or fourth, you're like, they'll be fine, you know. Whereas with your first, it's like, oh my gosh, he hasn't eaten in 6 hours. Is he sick? What are we gonna do?
Apparently, the new trend is going to be FAFO parenting.
That's
there you go.
My preferred method based on
that's how I was raised. That's it. Like with everything, it's like, oh, somebody hit you. Well, you better find a way to hit them harder. You know. Like,
by the way, thank you, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, man. We really do appreciate it. Really do appreciate it. There will be many monsters consumed.
I'll give one of those monsters to my son before I send him over to the in-laws.
Proper payback. But that's I don't have kids yet myself. Hopefully coming soon, but none yet. But I think that there are a few good examples out there among influencers that do a good job with this. Now, I can't speak to other things they say or do, but guys like the golden one, Marcus Folin over in Sweden, again, I can't speak to any other things he's done or said, but as far as he and his wife go, having followed their social media for a while, they do a very good job of promoting family and promoting the value of family and showing photos of them with their kids out doing things, but they always cover the face of their kids. So I've never once, I still don't know what their kids look like. I just know that there is a child with them doing things, and they're taking their daughter places, and they're out and doing things, and they have tips on experiencing things. So I think it's a very easy middle ground to find, just what I've seen anecdotally, when you take that FAFO parenting approach. If as long as you do everything you can to protect your kids from everything you can, there is a certain level of independence you have to give them. Obviously, this is going outside of the idea of internet and predators and things like that. I think internet restrictions for kids are a very different conversation, but this is kind of tying back to the cultural conversation, something that I recently saw that I thought was pretty incredible. This past weekend, I took my godson to the park with his parents, and we got to let him go and play a little bit. It's a little bit of a social exercise, right? Like making sure he's able to properly interact with kids. He's twice the size of all the kids his age and twice as smart, so he has to learn how to reel himself in, right? He can't be physical like other smaller kids can. So a little bit of a social experiment there, but the way these playgrounds are structured now, and Nina, I see you, man. We'll get to that question here soon. That's a good one. Again, it's structured a lot more like things were in the 90s. I mean, we saw, Chris, you and I growing up, we saw the transition from the FAFO playgrounds, where if you jumped from a 20-foot height, you figured it out. Like you figured
some of
maybe,
those were death traps, man.
yeah, you
Jesus.
played Legend of Zelda or something as a kid, so you rolled when you hit the ground and tried to see if it would work, things like that, right? Or you try to see maybe Superman can fly because of his cape, right? Only one way to find out. And
I broke my wrist on a playground.
Right. We went from that to these weird stifled plastic playgrounds that weren't fun for kids.
Not gonna get any splinters at all on those things.
Yeah, they got crazy hot in the sun, and so they just weren't fun to play on. And you saw a lot less kids there. But this specific playground was designed specifically with families in mind, which sounds weird to say for a playground, but you could see it in the way they thought it out, the way they planned it out. They had little sections that were appropriate for all ages. They had these crazy forts that were a ton of fun to play in with ropes and swings and all kinds of super dangerous stuff that parents in the 2000s would never have been okay with. And my godson specifically, he was playing tag with a kid, and he did a full-on Assassin's Creed jump off from a freaking fort, right? This thing had to have been like 10, 15 feet off the ground. It was sloped on top and then had like a 5-foot drop after that. He slid down that bitch, jumped right off, hit the ground, face planted. And then his parents were like, "Oh, you're good. You got it." And it's like, the soft, spongy fake turf. So he just hops back up and keeps running. It's that FAFO parenting, like they have to F around and find out themselves what hurts them, what damages them, and that is how you encourage a healthy environment for them and encourage other
Either you guys seen the web comic of the two parents sitting down watching their kids, and then an asteroid's coming down, and then the asteroid's coming for the kid, and the one parent's like, oh, and then the asteroid just completely buries the kid, and the one parent's like, oh my gosh, and the other parent's like, no, don't acknowledge the pain. And then the child crawls out of the crater and is like, did you see that, Mommy?
It's literally though, like seriously.
It'll be fine.
You only react if you do.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's an extreme example. There are bad injuries that happen sometimes, and you have to deal with that. Yeah, it's not so much of it is what you make of it, and that might be a metaphor for the population decline too. Is it going to be catastrophic? Well, the economy is largely psychological. If we look at it as like, oh, this is catastrophic and everyone freaks out, it can be catastrophic, but it's also an opportunity. It's a self-selective process. If there's any sort of genetic component to the proclivity to have kids, we might be in a psychologically selective environment right now. Which I
aren't going to breed themselves out.
Yeah, and I feel hesitant to say that because so much of it is persuasion, and many people who would have made great parents have been persuaded not to be. Right. And to Ian's question,
yeah,
right? What do you say to guys who do not wish to have kids? Aren't there people that should not be raising kids? Of course, there are people who should not be raising kids. I think that number's a lot lower than some of us are inclined to think. You look at people who are like, oh, I couldn't imagine that person raising a kid. It's like, well, first of all, you don't know how having a kid might change them. Second of all, like, what matters, my feeling, and I think there's some research to back this up, is that the most important thing you can do as a parent is not provide particular experiences for kids. It's not like saying I love you enough times, although that matters, it's not any of the stuff that many people will try to guilt you into thinking you're a bad parent if you don't do. But it's the example you set in your relationship with your spouse. There's nothing you can do better for your children than love your husband or your wife and like be there, and even be a team against the kids sometimes. And it's beyond that, there are some basic things like don't drunkenly beat your kids, right? Don't be on drugs. Don't be in jail. Don't be a freaking criminal. Don't like. There's some just read up what an ACE score is and just don't do that list.
Yep.
It's it's not hard to do. It's not hard to don't starve your kids. Don't be so poor that you can't afford food. That kind of thing. Which ties in really with the drugs and alcohol thing.
And
but
there's probably a difference also between, I mean, there is a difference between people that honestly don't wish to have children and have a good life, and people that don't have children for some other reason, that like an opposition to it that's based on, some sort of misanthropic idea, or you get what I'm saying. Like there's people that honestly just don't want to have children, and it's
sure.
absolutely okay. And then there's people that are antagonistic against the idea, like some sort of oppositional, stance towards not just them having kids, but other people having kids.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between people who sincerely are comfortable with the idea of not having kids and are completely happy to live their life that way. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And then the people who are convinced through external means, and this is mostly women, because men, because of our sperm production, I think we all know this. Hopefully everyone listening knows this too. We can have kids our entire life, right? Sperm quality goes down a little bit as you age, but it's more linear, and we can still produce kids our entire life. Women have a pretty short window, and a lot of women get really, really upset when I talk to them about this, because either they don't want to acknowledge it or they've never heard it before, which is disturbing. But after the age of 35, pregnancies are considered geriatric.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous for the mother and for the baby to get pregnant after the age of 35. So
if it's their first pregnancy.
Small. So a lot of these women will become convinced through TV, movies, friends that don't have kids, or other women that will try to crabs in a bucket, prevent them from having kids. It's convince them that they shouldn't, or you should wait. You should wait until you're financially stable. Well, you're not going to be financially stable until you're like 45, right? It's you don't hit that point in life until middle age, after the window when you can have kids. So to get more direct to Ian's question, there are definitely people who shouldn't have kids, and plenty of people who are totally fine and happy to not have kids, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think the issue is the people who would make good parents that don't, because they're convinced out of it. And getting to the Idiocracy thing you just brought up. Idiocracy, hilarious movie, classic by all means. There's definitely a side of that where dumb people tend to breed more, but it's I don't think it's
you got RK selection theory going in the chat here.
Right. But I don't think it's quite the catastrophe that we think it is. And it's
funny because we on the one hand we have that is the thing that's happening, but there is another side to that, which is the dumber people are also selecting themselves out at a disproportionate rate as well, via homelessness, drug addiction, so forth, prison, and at the same time, people who are interested in this can go down this particular rabbit hole. There is a movement in Silicon Valley right now that is a kind of eugenics movement being pushed by a bunch of tech bros, basically. And Elon Musk is kind of an unofficial member of this kind of group that think we need to have like as many smart babies as possible. And they're thinking in like generational Genghis Khan terms. It's like, I want to have, me and my wife, we both met at Harvard. We work in Silicon Valley at some tech startup. We're making $2 million a year. And we are convinced we're so much better than everyone else. So we're going to have 10 children. We've planned it out. We've scheduled it out. We have these programs set in place, and we want to encourage our kids to have as many kids as possible, and like they're very quiet about it. So it's not something that the public is focusing on, except with alarm, right? Because like we were talking about at the very beginning, there is a tendency to focus upon the alarmist thing, the catastrophic things, and not on the like, oh, things are good. But I think there is enough of that. There is enough of Elon Musk, knocking up some other random journalist type stuff going on to offset this idiocracy tendency that people are talking about. And Idiocracy is a fun movie. It's a funny movie, but it is one of these movies that primes people for what we call confirmation bias, which is if I see a movie that primes me to think in one direction, and then I see 10 events, 5 of which go in one direction and 5 of which go in the other, I'll see the 5 that can confirm the thing I was primed to see, and I just don't even notice the other 5. And now it's like, oh yeah, everything I'm seeing is further confirmation of the truth of this thing that is also being falsified in equal numbers or maybe even greater numbers, but I'm not noticing it because I haven't been primed to see it in that way. I think Idiocracy is one of the movies that has done that, has had that effect more than most other movies in the last 20 years.
Definitely. And I think I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on here for a little bit, but going back to the idea of the cultural changes we've undergone that have led to this fertility crisis, think about the mental association that's being made in a film like Idiocracy. I mean, Ian, you just accidentally made it there with that comment, is the idea that smart people don't breed, stupid people do.
Yeah. So now, if I have kids, that means I must be one of the dumb ones.
Exactly. And it's playing off of the stereotype, and it's not necessarily that direct cause and effect, but the association is still there, where what they're saying is that, oh, look at this, smart people will eventually be bred out of existence because us smart people who live in New York City, we don't have kids until we know we're ready, whereas these dumb people have as many kids as they can because they just don't prepare. And when you look at the reality of the middle class, that's not the case. Obviously, there's a lot of dumb people that do breed, but what do these guys end up going on to do? They go on ending up to be what people consider low-class roles in society that are still super important. Garbage men, mechanics, plumbers. They still all
knives.
They still all serve a valuable part of society, as long as they're somewhere in the middle class and net tax contributors. And then what we see a lot in the lower class is they just kill their kids. Sure, they're getting pregnant all the time, but the rate at which they kill their own kids is extremely high. So I think that all that movie really served to do in the end was just convince people that the smart person thing to do is to not have kids, or to put off having kids.
Although it might have done, it did that. It definitely did that. But it might have also set people up to be concerned about this in a, and again, I do think one of the core problems here is anxiety. But to say, hey, we do need to worry about an unintentional dysgenic incentive system we might set up. Right. We don't need state-sponsored eugenic programs. That's a very bad idea. But we also don't need state-sponsored dysgenic programs, because that's even dumber.
Exactly.
Exactly. In every sense.
And as far kind of circling back to the and Ian, I really appreciate you contributing like this, man. This definitely is adding to the conversation, so I do appreciate it. Japan is a good example of what we can expect from the civilizational ebb and flow. There was a recent scandal where their government tried to do the Western government thing and import a ton of people, including illegals, from all over the third world to try to fix their birth rate problem. And the country, thankfully, they saw how it's affected the UK. They've seen how it's affected the US. And so they're rebelling against it early. Hopefully they'll be able to solve that problem before it happens. But I think Japan will be an interesting test case, because the quality of life of the Japanese person is still extremely high, even though the younger generations progressively keep getting less and less and less in terms of how they're procreating. And there's a lot of cultural issues there that need solved on their own. But in terms of the quality of life of the average Japanese citizen, they don't have the same welfare state we do. So they're able to get really good medical care, whereas today, because old people didn't plan for retirement, they're relying on the young to subsidize their lifestyles. They use Medicaid and Medicare, and they don't get necessarily high quality care. So the Japanese seem to be still living a very high quality lifestyle. And what I've seen, and this is taking the conversation in a different direction, but just in terms of the way, going back to Malthus and why he was wrong, human development adapts to whatever changing circumstances we have, right? They expected our cities to be flooded by horse poop, and it was going to be a growing problem until the automobile came around, right? I think that Japan is a good example of how automation is a good thing in a way, because it prevents this expected economic collapse from a lack of labor and a lack of demand, where a lot of these jobs that are filled by menial labor, the population goes away, you have automation to fill those roles, and the population is still able to maintain a decent quality of life until eventually the culture can swing on the pendulum, recover, and then become more prosperous again in terms of birth rates. So Japan will be an interesting test case if they can keep out of the spiral of importing infinity third world criminals.
I mean, and you hear they live very long lives. So if there's a whole bunch of 100-year-old Japanese people and no young people to take care of them, it's clunkers, it's toasters. They're going to have to rely on toasters.
Damn clankers. But they're not going to have a housing crisis, right? They're not going to have to clear cut some of their beautiful forest and wildland to build more houses, because there's a ton of houses that are readily available and stupid cheap right now. So it's not all bad necessarily. It's possible that this is just a part of civilizational cycle where eventually, as the population drops, the housing crisis we're in right now, where it's almost impossible for millennials or Gen Z to buy houses or property.
And maybe to expand your point, Justin, about that, it's not just housing markets or population, but maybe all complex systems that have a degree of reflexivity, that have a degree of participant reaction to inputs into all of these assumptions. And this is like true with chaotic systems like climate models or the economy. There are too many variables to predict accurately. So and there's a natural tendency to swing back from any one extreme, whether that's temperature or price or population. And I think any kind of catastrophic prediction should be taken with a grain of salt on its face, basically regardless of context. But with in a reflexive environment like an economy or a human population, that's like doubly so.
Yes. Because
there's a certain kind of person who hears about a declining population is like, oh, that means my kids will have like double the demographic like role to play, you know.
That thought has occurred to me. I'm not above that. Like,
yeah.
Oh, that means my kids will have significantly less
competition.
Yeah. They'll be able to do a lot better. The same way that because the people, the labor available, right? The demand for labor went up, the supply went down, and peasants in England specifically, for example, after the Black Death, became within several generations so well paid, the government felt the need to step in to prevent it, because there was a middle class developing, which threatened to totally upend the pseudo-feudalist structure they had there.
Yeah.
Just because demand was so highly valued that in order to get the land worked, they had to pay peasants very, very well. That's the kind of situation we're heading toward, right? These white-collar jobs, it works out that these upper-class families are breeding themselves out because blue-collar families are still plenty prosperous. The white-collar jobs are going to be automated away anyway. AI is heading that direction. That's what I'm studying right now to be a part of automating away these finance bros. And the blue collar work, mechanics, HVAC techs, electricians, they're always going to be in demand, and I don't think those people are in any danger of demographic collapse.
Yeah.
Right?
AI itself will require a labor force of its own. People to manage the servers, people
Exactly.
to do the prompts, people to come up with new variations and so forth.
Right. A trade skill of its own in a way, as far as maintaining the servers, and then as far as the small segment of highly intelligent people, like in Silicon Valley, that do reproduce and breed, well, it's going to be intelligent people who do run the white collar systems, and then it returns back to um, I hate, since learning the root of the word meritocracy, I hate using it, but a meritocratic system where the highly skilled and highly intelligent that are better suited to those roles fill those roles, and then the people who are better suited to, not necessarily less intelligent. I mean, Chris, you're a fantastic example of someone who has fucking 200 IQ and still in the trades. But there are people who are going to fill those roles, and I think that that's kind of the takeaway message. Now that we're coming up on an hour, is that the idea that the population decline will inevitably lead to a civilizational collapse is very, very myopic. It's assuming, like Malthus did, that everything will remain the same as it is, and nothing will change, and the circumstances won't change, and the trend will continue linearly down at the same rate, and that's it. And once it hits bottom, we're done. Right? Same as Malthus thought. Once population hit peak, we're done. And the reality is that technology and civilization goes in cycles such that we're going to be fine. And you have 5 kids now that are going to do just fine with how in demand their services are going to be, whatever those services end up being.
Come springtime, knock on wood. Yeah, and if I could backtrack a moment, because that is a good point to conclude on. The reality is we can't predict the future. That things are too complex. So these predictions of catastrophe, they actually might be true, but we don't know that. We don't know that based on some trend line that someone drew.
Right.
More likely, we'll continue to have ups and downs, ebbs and flows, and in the face of ignorance about the real future, the best we can do is what matters most, what is virtuous, what is best to do in the moment. And if I could take a very, I know we're past an hour, but a brief digressionary backtrack. We talked a little bit about feminism and stuff before. So much of feminism was a sort of proto-trans mentality of I think I know what it's like to be this other person.
Yes.
So much of feminists believed they knew what it was like to be men, and they wanted to essentially be men in this caricature of what they thought a hyper-masculine man was like, being the boss bitch business lady. And I think it was millennial women that discovered what men had been trying to tell women all along, which was like, you think our jobs are like this incredibly satisfying, like deeply meaningful thing? Like it's not that we dread it. Like we do get some sense of satisfaction out of our job, but it also sucks. It is kind of soul crushing, especially the corporate stuff. And there are all these women who have now spent some time in the corporate job world and realizing they're not valued like these super high tier caricatures of men that they thought men were like living as. And they're realizing they're thought of as just a number, even more of a piece of meat than they are in the dating market.
Yep.
But worse. And I think a lot of these disillusioned boss bitch feminists are the engines behind this sort of trad culture pendulum shift. And that will probably get, disillusioned a little bit too. But I think at the end of the day, when you think existentially about what is it I can do that's meaningful in this life, there's all kinds of things we can do. We can build a house. We can paint a masterpiece, to borrow from Fight Club. We can do all these kinds of great things. But there's nothing as existentially significant as creating another life.
Exactly.
The potential that has that grows down the timeline of the future. Nothing really compares to that.
Exactly.
You know, which is not to say that people. I don't want to sound like one of these Christian guys who are like, "Oh, you're not really a man until you have a child." So, fuck you. No, there's all kinds of ways you can live an excellent and meaningful life without that. But I think a lot of women in particular are beginning to feel the existential significance and existential superiority of creating life with all of its stresses and frustrations, because it has that too, over the corporate grind.
Yes, the real, what they're discovering is that the highlight of the stereotypical 50s Norman Rockwell man was not getting a promotion at work. That's not the highlight of his life. The highlight of his life is coming home to his family. That's what every man looks forward to at the end of the day. And that is an indication of where the real meaning in life lies. And I think that on a utilitarian side, right, you're fulfilling the base need of all biological life, which is to reproduce. But what that means for us is thinking human beings, as humans being in the world, so to speak.
Is this a cue that we'll be talking about Dasein next week?
Yeah, that's a reference to the research I've been doing on Dasein. But it's part of the human experience is that I think that is the meaning that so many people are missing. And that's a broader conversation. But I've seen a lot of people now that discovered after having kids how much it changed them and how much it improved their lives. So that's kind of tied this back the way we've kind of made a habit of with all these episodes, tying it back to practical ways to something to take from this conversation in order to practically improve your own life. Not necessarily to have kids, but in the idea of pursuing a virtuous life, being open to having kids and understanding that there is virtue in being a good father. That is, I think, a key to living a happy and prosperous life.
And maybe just like, don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. If the anxiety about the future is a big inhibitor to the growth of future generations. But even if you are one of those people who for whatever reason are not going to have kids, not being anxious is still a net improvement in your life.
That's a fact.
Even if your goal is to solve some of these problems, not being anxious about it will help you think, more clearly. One of the types of people who should probably not be having kids are the clinical sociopaths. They make excellent SF guys. They make excellent surgeons. They make excellent prison guards. And the clarity that comes to them from not being too emotional helps them perform their jobs better, especially in the medical surgical world. So we'd all be a little bit more like that where the unpredictable future is concerned.
FAFO, right? That sort of mentality, I think a lot of people would do well. Stop worrying about the future. That having kids is a good thing. Obviously, if you're in freaking $200,000 of debt, probably solve that first. But most people are doing well enough. And if you think you don't have the money for it, but you're able to survive and support yourself, when you have kids, you'll just stop partying and you'll care a lot more about your kids than you do about drinking. So guess what? All that money is going toward your kid. So kids aren't nearly as expensive as people claim. But because that conversation can go on for another hour if we wanted it to. Ed, do you have anything to add before we close out?
I like babies. That's I don't have kids. I like it. You guys talked a lot about babies. I don't have kids, but I like them.
Babies are good. You are a fantastic uncle, though. That counts.
I am an uncle. Yeah,
I don't like babies. I like kids. I like six to seven and up is fucking fun.
Yeah. That I mean
babies. We'll let the women handle that.
Babies are fun until they hit their teenage years, and then they're just, oh, come on, Jack. Babies are great.
I meant babies in the sense of kids in general.
I I am legally obliged to disagree with Jack that they're the worst, but there are better things than babies.
Okay, I agree. The kids on like the 5 to 10 years old are a lot more fun than babies because you can run around with them, you can sword fight, you can do all kinds of fun stuff. Whereas babies just kind of sit there and cry. So that's fair. But you're right, Ian. They can't lift. But once they hit like 3 or 4, you can get them a little PVC pipe, teach them how to do squats. I'm just saying, my little 4-year-old godson, we got him doing BJJ. We got him doing push-ups and sit-ups, and he's a little athlete. So there is a young age where you can start this sort of thing.
My son's soccer season starts tomorrow. So
Hell yeah.
I'm excited about that.
Hell yeah. All right, Bulls. Well, this is a fantastic conversation. Glad we got through our technical difficulties early on and we're able to make the subsequent hour productive. So with all that said, Jack, thanks for popping in toward the end. We really do appreciate it. And
thank you, Ian, for the support.
But our man Ian there just added to your monster budget, which I know isn't too useful to you right now, but perhaps use that on some very fine Diet Cokes. So, all right, Bulls. With all that said, hope you have a fantastic evening and stay solar.
Stay solar.
Stay solar.
I'm still alive.
Thank you for watching or listening to the Journal of Solar Culture. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and leave us a comment. The first volume of our journal is available in paperback and now, finally, on Kindle. Pick it up in our store or on Amazon.
Technical difficulties.